All right, guys, it is Blind Spiral here. It is just me this week. I know I'm a little bit more lonely than usual. We're doing the show solo this week with it being Thanksgiving and so many moving pieces and who's doing what on what day. It's just going to be me with you this week. I do have my dog with me though, and he's definitely watching more than usual. He's there. Oh God, this is backwards kind of. So you can see the little guy hiding right there. Fun fact, his name is Kiko. He's named after Kiko Alonso, for any of you who remember that person existing. And yeah, it's a fun story, but we'll share that another time. Let's focus on what we've got going on in the fantasy football realm. So we take a look at last week, some big games last week, and some surprising games. So the implications pick up their second win only of the season against Lose Like Flynn. We've got Team Havoc with their newly unveiled logo. We'll see a bigger version of it soon. Up against the Webster Tigers, picking up a win. Watson's 25th Masseuse picks up their win as well. Dan Flashes and Kung Fu Pandas in the game of the week. Dan Flashes pick up the game there, which is a huge one. Diamond Dogs fall to the Quad Fathers, and Quad Fathers continues their trouncing of some teams and rapidly picking up points. And Rutro Raggy picks up the win against Brownout. None of this too insane, and what's interesting is it actually doesn't even affect the standings whatsoever. So as we take a look here at the standings in a second, nothing's really changed, but we do see that the implications has finally broken 100 points again, which is nice to see for myself, as you can imagine. Lose Like Flynn with the name change there is now 2-9 as well, so we both hang out towards the bottom. Team Havoc continues their point streak. Watson's 25th Masseuse picks up a win again. But really it's what's happening towards the top center of these standings here, and we'll go ahead and flip to that scene while we're here as well. So nobody's moved on the ladder from last week. So nobody's gone up in a position, nobody's gone down in a position, except Dan Flashes and Kung Fu Pandas switch from 4th to 5th place overall, but that doesn't really affect anything here. Top of the Jamarcus Russell division, Raggy stays there at 9-2. Dan Flashes 7-4, and pretty much has sealed 9-2 a playoff spot. It hasn't officially happened yet. There is a wild world where it doesn't happen, but it is so unlikely. Every game has to go perfectly against him, because I did the math and looked into it. But it would basically be Brownout wins like 2 of their games. The Pandas win 2, and then Pandas win 1, and then Quad Fathers win 2. It is super weird. But one more win will secure the first playoff spot that's locked in for Rutro Raggy there. Webster Tigers still kind of in the fight, but not really at the same exact time, and Justin's Deli is out of it. Leafs division, we've got, again, 3 teams now 7-4, which is insane to think about. Those standings stay the same. Brownout holds a tiebreaker over Kung Fu Pandas and the tiebreaker over Quad Fathers, which is now known as Make Fullbacks Great Again. We'll see a bigger version of their logo soon, since it's a new one. And the Kung Fu Pandas hold the tiebreaker over Make Fullbacks Great Again as well, so they stay in their position. Lose Like Flynn hangs at the bottom with their new logo, with the trophy flipped upside down as well. Diamond Dogs hold on to their place at the top of the Smith division, but it is getting closely sketchy with Watson's 25th Masseuse coming up behind him. Keep in mind, Watson's 25th Masseuse does have the tiebreaker on everybody in the division so far. They did come out 3-0 before losing 5 games in the rounds against the other 8 teams. So they have the tiebreaker over the Diamond Dogs, but they are still a game behind. So their game against each other will pretty much decide how that division goes. Team Havoc still in a good spot, potentially. If they go on a win streak, they play against Watson's 25th Masseuse in this week, and the implications at the bottom there, 2-9. Let's pull up the playoff bracket while we're talking about it as well. So again, not much change. Rutro Raggy and Brownout still holding the 1st and 2nd seed with those buys. Diamond Dog against Team Havoc, still the 6th spot. The 5th and 4th spot are Dan Flashes and Kung Fu Pandas. Again, technically Dan Flashes picks up the 4th seed now versus the 5th, which does nothing because 4 and 5 play each other no matter what. But that is what it looks like on paper, since Dan Flashes did pick up a win against the Kung Fu Pandas a while ago. The extra pick bracket, though, has the Make Fullbacks Great Again against Watson's 25th Masseuse still in that bracket. We've got a toilet bowl bracket of the Webster Tigers, Justin's Deli, The new acronyms are messing me up. Lose like Flynn and the implications still there. What's really, really crazy is that 6th seed. So let me pull up. I should have had this ready, and I thought that I did, but I don't. So that 6th seed is decided by most points for out of the remaining 7 teams. So Kung-Fu Pandas, Brownout, Diamond Dogs, and Rutro Raggy and Dan Flashes hold the top 5 seeds. Based off their record, based off of their matches against each other, the Quad Fathers lost to all of those teams that are in the same, in that 4th and 5th seed, being Dan Flashes and Kung-Fu Pandas. So they are in the 6th seed race. And I'm looking at the points here. So currently held most points for out of those 7 teams left is Team Havoc. They have 1598, so 1,598 points. Right behind them, and I say right behind them, are the Quad Fathers / Make Fullbacks Great Again, 1,597.04. So quite literally 1.7 points behind Team Havoc for that 6th seed. And we've got Watson's 25th Masseuse, 1,587, so about 11 points behind. So basically, if Watson's 25th Masseuse can score 11 more points than the other 2 teams over the next 3 weeks they're in, if the Quad Fathers can score 1.7 more points than Spider Pigs, oh gosh, forbid, we don't talk about him. Cut that out. If he can score 1.7 more points than Team Havoc, they're in. And if Team Havoc can hold them off, they're in. That being said, Team Havoc, from my perspective and in my opinion, from where we're sitting now, Team Havoc's only way in is points 4. I don't see a world where they sweep the division to go 8-6. And even if they do, they still lose a tiebreaker to Watson. No, they would be points 4. So yeah, so they still need to have more points than Watson's. So if they beat Watson's, then they split their head-to-head record, meaning that they are both 1-1 against each other, so it goes to points 4. So Havoc needs to have more points and sweep the division. So sweeping the division doesn't even matter. For Havoc to get into the playoffs, they need to score more points than Watson's 25th Masseuse and the Quad Fathers. Even if they sweep the division, need to have more points scored, because the Diamond Dogs also beat them. So if they sweep the division and Watson wins the other 2, they lose. It comes down to points 4. If they sweep the division and the Diamond Dogs wins the other 2, if Diamond Dogs wins one of those games, it's a tiebreaker, points 4. Currently, Diamond Dogs up right around 250 points. So that's out of the question. So Diamond Dogs would have to lose to 2 teams, one of them being Team Havoc, in order to take that wild card spot. Watson's 25th Masseuse, though, could beat the Diamond Dogs to take that spot. And if that's the case, that screws up the points 4 competition for that 6th seed by a lot, because in the team that's left over in the and has the highest points 4 is the Diamond Dogs at 18-17, and second place is over 200 points behind. So Quad Fathers rooting horribly so for the Diamond Dogs. Oh, make fullbacks great again. Horribly rooting for the Diamond Dogs, because otherwise it just gets super colluded there. I think if it doesn't happen like that, it's just a super tight race for the other 3 teams. There is a chance that, I don't want to sound too optimistic, there's a chance, of course, of these upsets happening that could really throw things off. I know that the Tigers would love to play spoiler, Justin Stelly would love to play spoiler to knock a team out, because if one of those 2 teams can pick up a win on Dan Flashes, it could effectively knock them out of that 4th seed and really screw up their chances in their season, which would be interesting. I'm sure Lose Like Flynn would like to do the same thing. If they beat any of those teams, they're already being at 7-4, it really messes up their chances in their division. And the same thing for the implications. They hold 2 of the picks of the people in their division, and while they're going for points 4, they still want to pick up some wins there, maybe mess with the Diamond Dogs a bit. So all those bottom 4 teams have real opportunities to be a spoiler. If they could pick up one against the Diamond Dogs, they could effectively knock them out of the playoffs. If either the Havoc or Watson's going a streak. If they pick up a win against Watson's, it really secures a pick for them, potentially a higher pick. If they pick up a win on Havoc, it could secure a higher pick, assuming the points don't fall that way. So while this is interesting and there's a clear bottom set of teams per se, every single game from this point on really matters. And as we talk about that, let's take a look at the upcoming week. Feature matchup of the week, Brownout against Kangsu Pandas. Should be a big one because that's really deciding how that division shapes up and who takes that number 2 seed, possibly, probably, maybe. As we'll see how it goes, but that is really a tone setter if Brownout can get out of that with a 2-0 win over Kangsu Pandas. It's got huge tiebreaker implications. Kangsu Pandas and Brownout, by the way, Brownout has more points scored, so Kangsu Pandas, even if they pick up the win here, it still comes down to points. But can they pick up 90 points in 3 weeks over Brownout? It's possible. We've seen them put up 200 points like it's nothing, so we'll see how that goes. Otherwise, Diamond Dogs against the Implications, Justin Stelly against Webster Tigers, Dan Flash against Rutro Raggy, the battle for that Jamarcus Russell division. Watson's 25th Masseuse against Team Havoc, as both of those teams have a chance to make a run at the division title still technically, but that game right there will really decide which of the two, it's a slim chance, but which of the two can continue that dream, which is out and focused only on points, and the fullbacks, make fullbacks great again against Lose Like Flynn, the two name change teams hanging out at the bottom. Lose Like Flynn trying to see if they can upset the fullbacks, and the fullbacks again trying to see if they can claw their way up a spot in the division. With Brownout or Kangsu Pandas guaranteed to lose, if they could pick up a win, they move up in the standings, which is another big point that we didn't even touch about when we're looking at the playoffs. Talking about our theme for the week. So we did buy and sell for the first 3 weeks. Then we did a mock draft last week. We're doing a trade deadline live stream next week. So I wanted to think about what to talk about for this week. And we're going to talk about trades. So not very fun. And that's a bit of a boring scene right there. So let's go ahead and just do this for now. Oh, God, that works. Trades. I went through and looked at every single team and looked at contracts, looked at the record for each team, looked at a bunch of different factors, and determined, in my opinion, who would make the most sense for each team to trade away, whether that was for picks, whether that was for maneuvering a contract, whether that was for maybe more depth, maybe it was for upside, maybe it was for this, maybe it was for that, whatever the case may be. Going through each roster, looking at it, and super briefly, this wasn't me diving incredibly in depth, but just looking and saying, okay, here are the 2 or 3 people I would think in their team's position to move, looked further at the contracts, potential re-signs on the team, potential contract situation for those players who could go to a different team, because that always creates ambiguity, and came up with my final list of which, for words are hard, especially if we don't have 2 other people to bounce it off on, or 3, or 1. So which player from each team should be traded? Of course, you always see those ESPN articles about trade deadline and who should trade this player to this team and why it makes sense for both teams and this and that. Then 99% of the time it never happens. Pretty much expecting the same thing here. We'll see how it goes. I did not take into account trade deadline, trade block. I did not take into account any active offers that have come to me. You guys know I'm a slut for trading. So anybody that sent me something saying they're actively looking to move somebody, or trying this or trying that, or trying to get something done before the deadline, I did not take any of that into account. I did not take anybody that is on the trade block or not on the trade block into account. And I also did not take any picks into account. So I was thinking about doing a bit of a cop out and saying, well, this guy should trade their 2023 first or 2022 second, or not 2022 second, 2023 second. But I felt like it was a bit of a cop out. So I went for players only, did not take into account what that manager already may or may not be thinking. I just kind of went for it. Hopefully this doesn't piss too many of you guys off with me thinking I'm an idiot for my beliefs. But let's get it started off. We're going to start it off with a bang. Cooper Kupp for Dan Flashes. Cooper Kupp, obviously a little bit older of a player, but he's been absolutely having some dominating years. The problem is it looks like he's done for some time, and Dan Flashes needs to push now to win. If they lose a game with how many teams are at 7-4 right now, they are effectively out of the playoffs. When you look at their points for, it's at 1504, meaning they have to make up roughly 90 points in order to be considered in the most points for competition. Dan Flash's route to the playoffs has got to be with the 4th seed that they have now, or the 5th seed that they're going to have to desperately hold on to. And with Cup being out for a few weeks of the season, or whatever the story is, like, I should have looked up more information on this. Part of me thinks you could move him and sell him to anybody. I mean, there are probably teams who have the depth that would take him on to give themselves star power for next year. There are maybe rebuilding teams who could take him on at a discount and happily send you a couple pieces and a pick, and you could use that pick to go somewhere else. But I just feel like that injury at this time, Dan has already pushed the chips in, trading away his first-round pick in both 2023 and 2024. Part of me really thinks he traded away his second-round pick. I know he did in 2023, traded his second-round pick in 2023. I'm looking now to see if he traded away a second-round pick in 2024. He did not, so he still has a second-round pick in 2024. But Dan has put so much onto this year that part of me just thinks that at this point in time, you've already pushed all your chips in. You just need to take one more push. Whoops. You need to do one more push to try to secure a playoff spot here when you're this close fighting tooth and nail. If you had a game cushion or something like that, or way more points for, I'd be all for it, kind of hanging on and waiting. But I would be really nervous, and Cooper Kupp is a piece that you could move that won't hurt your chances right now, but could really also get you big pieces that you need to go for this push and see what you can do from there. When we look at the Webster Tigers here for a second, I went with Donovan Peoples-Jones. Donovan Peoples-Jones has been having a pretty good year so far, kind of out of nowhere. He's 2 years pro, but a lot of his games have been double-digit points, 10 points, 11 points, 12 points. But how do things change with Watson when he shows up this week? And how do things change for the Browns in the offseason? They're kind of obviously showing that they are trying to make a high-powered offense here, and I don't think there's anything really stopping them from drafting a wide receiver in the draft to really be a secondary force to Amari Cooper, who clearly is getting that target share. The Joker's getting a lot of target share. Chubb is having a great season. I don't know if Jonathan Peoples-Jones is sustainable, and Webster, this is the guy he's on a one-year deal right now for cheap. Webster Tigers, is this somebody that you want to re-sign, or is this somebody you can ship away for maybe a second-round pick, maybe a third-round pick to a team that's contending, or do you hang on to him, believe in him, and re-sign him? I just think he could be a curious piece. Something that we've got to keep in mind is that we don't get to move people after the trade deadline. That's such a stupid statement. Let me elaborate further. After the trade deadline, we don't get to trade anybody else until the rookie draft. So you get to re-sign 3 players on your team. One of them you can re-sign between 1 year and 5 years. 2 of them you re-sign 1 year and 3 years, and one's a restricted free agent. So you say, okay, what would everybody else pay this guy? The highest bidder, they tell you, okay, he would pay $60 for him. Then you say, okay, I match that. And the other person, whoever had the highest last time, says, okay, my final offer is this, and you get to choose to match him or not. That's how the re-signings work. So if you don't trade away or move pieces on a 1-year deal that you probably don't want to re-sign, you're 50-50 on re-signing, and then you decide not to re-sign them, and you could have gotten a 3rd-round pick for him, or a 4th-round pick, or a 2nd-round pick, that's just product wasted. And so you've got to ask, is Donovan Peoples-Jones somebody you want to re-sign, yes or no? And if the answer is no, you don't want to re-sign him because you've got other people on the team, why would you not move him for a 3rd-round pick or 4th-round pick? And if you're a contending team, a late 3rd-round pick could be just a little bit more than you need. For all those teams that are in that position that they're trying to score more points and win the points for battle for 6th seed, if your last flex spot is putting up 5-6 points, can you send your 4th-round pick that you're still holding on to the Webster Tigers, who you know is an animal, no pun intended, for 4th-round picks? Can you send a 4th-round pick for this guy and add 5 more points on? That might be all you need. Imagine if the season ended today and fullbacks rate again misses it by 1.7 points. I just think Donovan Peoples-Jones is a good candidate to maybe move if the Webster Tigers doesn't have any interest in resigning him, and could be ideal to send a late pick for in order to get somebody on your team that could produce some more points or just add some more depth to your squad. We keep moving. Ragged DeAndre Carter, and this is a similar story with Keenan Allen been out, Gerald Everett's been out, Mike Williams has been out. DeAndre Carter has had this rare opportunity to exceed and excel, and has had some success with the Chargers. Rutro Raggi traded for him earlier this season, but Rutro Raggi has plenty of depth on the team, and Michael Carter's just kind of hanging out there on the side. And so maybe this is an option where maybe you can partner DeAndre Carter with a pick and get something else more. Running back isn't necessarily the best or weakest position for him. He's got Zeke, and he's got Jamal Williams and James Conner, but he's got Higgins, Lazard, and Sutton currently a wide receiver. We obviously know the Kelsey Mahomes stack. He's got the depth at quarterback as well with Heineke, Brady. So part of me feels like, and obviously just made that trade, has CEH on the team, made the trade yesterday for Latavius Murray. But part of me feels like you should be able to send, but even bench depth, Zay Jones, Michael Gallup, Julio Jones. Like he's got enough receivers on the team that maybe you send DeAndre Carter away, maybe package it with a pick for a big upgrade, or even just try to get a small pick out of this, or send him in a third to somebody for a second. I just feel like DeAndre Carter almost has no place on that roster, and he was signed to a more expensive deal. And so maybe similar to Donovan Peoples-Jones, this is a guy that you can send away to get some points for. If I'm not mistaken, DeAndre Carter was signed to a one-year deal for $24 because it sounds like something I would do, and I was the one who signed it. Yeah, so DeAndre, 1 year, $24. So I don't think DeAndre Carter gets re-signed when you look at the rest of that team there. And so part of me feels like that might be the right move for Raggi there. But we'll have to see if that is the case or not. Moving on to Justin's Deli, Cam Akers. And I swear to God, I picked Cam Akers, and I will show you the screenshot. I picked Cam Akers at 4 o'clock this morning as the person to possibly move for Justin's Deli, just because it's such a weird situation. But nobody's taken over the lead backfield in Los Angeles. And now is, especially with his Darrell Henderson cut, now is as good a time as any to try to move Cam Akers. Justin's Deli is clearly taking on that rebuild, and it doesn't seem like Cam Akers is, he just sticks out like a sore thumb when you look at that team in the rebuild mode, that he still exists there. Cam Akers is a little bit more expensive. Get my numbers together. $63 this year, $81 next year, then he's done. But part of me feels like, again, especially with the news of Darrell Henderson, you might be able to move him now at an okay rate. I think pre 2022 NFL season, he was more expensive, and I think you could maybe a first for him or something like that. Now it doesn't look as good, so maybe you can partner Cam Akers in a third for a second or something like that, which, is that enough? It's an age-old story, right? Because Cam Akers is kind of in this weird position where if you have him on your team, you want to hold him, because can you get the value back that he could be worth if he starts to play again? Does he get better after having this full year practically off? You don't know, but Justin's Deli in the rebuild might want the picks, and there might be a team out there who's willing to take him on and take his contract on for a cheaper cost now, especially with Henderson gone. Just part of me feels like if you're going to move Akers, now's the time to do it. And until quite literally next year when training camp reports come out saying he looks great or he looks terrible. I just feel like Cam Akers was like this, and then the season started. I got to do this way for the camera so it makes sense. And the season started, and then he's just gone like this. And I feel like with this Henderson thing, we're at it, and this might be the last in months. So part of me feels like this is a really good selling point for Justin's Deli. But yeah, maybe I'm insane for thinking that way. I don't know. All right, sip time, and then we're going to keep on moving, and we're going to move to the Ryan Leaf division. I need I don't know, rock and roll music to play when I drink that, but I'm not very good at editing stuff. All right. Next one, Brownout Joe Mixon. Without spoiling anything, Joe Mixon's been trying to be moved by Brownout for some time lately. It's kind of died off recently in favor of trying to move Darren Waller, but Brownout's in a rough cap situation, and Brownout's trying to win now, and Joe Mixon is out. It's concussion, so we don't know how long that's going to take. He could come back soon. He might not come back soon. But if he's in the more severe concussion thing and he's out for 2-3 weeks, 2-3 weeks is all it could take for the wheels to come off the cart. And that bye, I think if you look at statistics, getting a first-round bye is the most important thing, and you increase your chances significantly to win the league if you get that first-round bye. Brownout has a 3-0 record already in the division. So Brownout, if they can hold on to that and go 5-1, 6-0. That would be huge. With the contract situation that Joe Mixon has, with the injury that he now has, part of me thinks you ship him away sometime soon. Again, he's in a weird spot, kind of like Cooper Kupp, where you could send him to a contender in hopes that they get back soon. Part of me feels like you could send him to a rebuilding team, hoping that they have Joe Mixon for next year and he's in his prime. But the other thing, too, is that, however you pronounce the homie's name, Sam Perezhny, oh, God, I should have done my homework. He just went off for 3 touchdowns. So he's shown that he can do it. And one of the things that's made Joe Mixon such a good fantasy player is a lot of people are in a timeshare, as we talked about, and as we had a great discussion about in the league the other day between Watsons and Flynn. That's not a thing in Cincinnati, and Joe Mixon has just had an insane dominating share of the snaps, and maybe he doesn't anymore after the injury and competency shown by the second running back in Cincinnati. And so that could be scary potentially. Maybe even if he comes back, does he still have, the 95, 96% of the snaps it felt like he had before? Does it go down to a 70-30? And then can he even sustain at 70%? Obviously, he had that 5 touchdown game, but that was a one-off in a sense. So we'll see if it continues or doesn't. Moving on to our next one, Kung Fu Panda's Jamison Williams. This was a tough one for me, but I think Jamison Williams is the right answer here if we're going to force each team. If we're going to force each team to pick a player. The reason I went with Jamison Williams, he is on an incredibly cheap 5-year deal. And when I say incredibly cheap, I'm saying he's $20 signed through 5 years. That is nuts. Still hasn't played a game yet this season. I think he was cleared to return, but he hasn't yet. But he's a rookie. A lot of people like him, and he still hasn't played yet. So when we talk about that hype that we just did for Cam Akers at the beginning of the 2022 season, Jamison Williams is still there, and if anything, it's continued to go up because we're getting closer to that point where it's time for him to play. And he might play this Thursday against Buffalo, which is not a good starting time for the Lions. But part of me just almost thinks this is the time to maybe move him. I feel like you could move him and the pick of some kind or another player to a team that needs depth for a superstar. And I mean a superstar. Kung Fu Pandas is no shortage of them. But if they can find somebody else that's like, top tier, a Devontae Adams, a Cooper Kupp when healthy, a Jamar Chase, it would just be incredible. And so you wonder if they can find a deal like this with Jamison Williams, or you wonder if they hold him and they still believe the hype. I just think this would be the time to maybe move him if you were considering adding extra firepower, because rookies start to get better throughout the season, obviously. We finally saw Treylon Burks come on last week. We saw Breece Hall start to finally come on halfway through the season before he tore his ACL. Clearly, I'm biased to know about my teams. But this would be possibly a good time to move Jamison Williams because that hype could be at an all-time high. And it could fizzle out on the Lions, but they do need a playmaker, especially Hawkinson's gone. There's ambiguity with what's going on in the backfield, so it could be a good hold. But part of me also feels like it could be a really good time to trade. Going on next to Lose Like Flynn, Donta Foreman. Donta Foreman's a weird one as well because he came out after the Christian McCaffrey trade and just dominated and ran all over the other team and had all the touchdowns and scored all the points. And I remember picking him up in multiple leagues and thinking to myself, I've got my guy. Thank goodness. In fact, there's one league that I'm doing well in where I picked him up and have been having running back issues or concerns a whole year. And I'm like, thank God I've got my RB2 now. And then just since then, he hasn't done very much. So you wonder, I personally think Carolina's got a lot of issues on offense. Everybody thinks that way too. But I personally think that Carolina could be someone to draft a running back soon, right? What's to say that they don't grab Bijan or one of these other big backs coming out of school and then immediately putting Foreman and Hubbard back in the place that they were before the season started? I mean, there's nothing saying they won't. Obviously, they drafted McCaffrey, so part of me would almost think that they would do it again. And Foreman could be a really good depth piece for a player to play in a flex spot. I think if you're counting on Foreman as your running back 2, you've got maybe an issue. I think if you count him as your flex piece, maybe not so bad. And so this could be an opportunity for Lose Like Flynn to offload him onto another team that could need something like that, maybe grab some picks in the process there, as I don't know the longevity of Foreman, but maybe I'm wrong and he gets it together, but it just feels like it's a situation that is going to have an expiration date on it pretty soon. And then we go to make fullbacks great again with a zoomed in version of the logo. Hopefully you can see it. They're a little bit nicer. I like that one. I'm really happy with that one. We've got Derek Carr, the quarterback. If you look at their quarterback room right now, it's really good. They've got Jimmy Garoppolo. They've also got Jameis Winston, who obviously isn't playing right now. Looks like he lost his job to Andy Dalton. They've got Joe Burrow, who they made that big trade for. And Derek Carr. And so part of me feels like with the depth that they could use elsewhere, that they could move one of their quarterbacks. And so I was trying to figure out which quarterback it would be. You could argue that it's Jimmy G, but there's ambiguity on what happens to him next year, so maybe you don't find a good trade partner. But Derek Carr is also only on a one-year deal currently in our league, and so he might be the guy to move. What you get from this is completely up to them, obviously, but there are some questions, really. Dameon Pierce, only 3.7 points last week. And they've got Devontae Adams. They've got CeeDee Lamb, who's been underperforming. They've got Chris Olave, who's been doing well. Dolchik at tight end, so that's fine. But their flex spots just haven't been good. Gibson scored 13 points last week, but he's so touchdown dependent, it feels like sometimes, even though he finally had a good week last week. And Boyd has not been streaking the way that he was before, and there's nothing on the bench. They made that big trade for Devonta Smith, where they overpaid for Devonta Smith, and they might need something back. They've got Brandon Cooks as well, but I just feel like Derek Carr to a QB-needy team could be a big enough piece to get another good player back. You could partner Carr with a player as well and really get something good back, I think, especially if you don't know if you're going to re-sign him. I can't imagine a world where a quarterback of Carr's caliber doesn't get re-signed at the end of this year, especially in Superflex, but part of me also thinks that maybe he could be the one to move because you've got two other quarterbacks that you can trust to start, plus Winston if he gets the job back. So maybe Carr's the one on the outs there for the fullbacks and making them great again. We're at the top of the order here in the new division, on the Kelly Smith division, so we're going to do our patented drink and cue the rock and roll music. This is my electric guitar solo. I hope you guys liked it. The implications, DeMarcus Robinson. A lot of people thought after, Bateman went down, that DeMarcus Robinson would be the number 2 guy behind the other person. This is so embarrassing. I really should have taken better notes. I'm ad-libbing this just from reading this morning. But DeMarcus Robinson seems like he's really come out as a number 1 wide receiver with Bateman out. So how long does that last, right? So he stepped up pretty big. So maybe he's the number 2 receiver there next year. But we obviously know this is the Mark Andrews show, and then everybody else is there maybe a little bit. And so you wonder, does DeMarcus Robinson stay like this or not so much? But as of right now, he's doing very well. And this is, again, another player that kind of fits the implications profile. If you're building, trying to get as many picks as possible. But the guy went off last week. 9 targets, 9 receptions, 128 yards. Had a hell of a game. And so this is somebody that you can see moving to another team. Again, looking for a depth piece for an earlier pick. The implications have a couple third-round picks, maybe partner him in a third for a second, or something along those lines. But DeMarcus Robinson is somebody that can easily move because he's showing flashes of that production. This is even with Andrews being there this last week, by the way. So, and of course, Andrews still could be a little banged up, but I think it's worth noting it's not on a week that Andrews is out, and he was the only option. They still don't know what's going on with the running game, so they're throwing the ball, and it wasn't 100% to Andrews like it usually is. So maybe DeMarcus is the one to move and get some points for a team. Moving on to the next player for the Diamond Dogs, Leonard Fournette. And this is kind of a weird one, but we talked about this a few weeks ago on the podcast, or recording, or whatever you want to call this. And Leonard Fournette is in this weird situation where the Diamond Dogs are damned if you do and damned if you don't. If Fournette continues to score points, he is going to be a top 12 running back, and he's going to hold out, and he's going to cost a little bit more than double, or I think about triple what he costs this year. And the Diamond Dogs went on the record saying that they have no comment on what they would do if Fournette does enter a holdout. Again, to remind you how the holdouts work, if a player holds out, the team that holds them can trade them away, cut them for no cap penalty, or re-sign them to a new deal at 60% of the top of the salary. So Fournette is on the bottom of that. So he is teetering at the bottom, but if he continues to score points, he's going to hold out. We don't know what happens then with the situation. He's only on a 2-year deal as well currently. If he doesn't score points, then you're in another precarious situation because you're trying to hold on to that first place spot in your division. So instead of dealing with a headache, maybe can you send Fournette somewhere else? You might be able to package him with a pick for an upgrade. You might just need to take a pick and then send that pick somewhere else to another team for a player as well. But Fournette's just in this awkward situation. The Diamond Dogs don't know what they're doing in terms of re-signing him or not, especially with the other running back ambiguity. Their other running back, Derrick Henry, obviously on a one-year deal. Aaron Jones was looking meh, but has looked better recently. So the Dogs don't necessarily know what they want to do, but this is their last opportunity to move Fournette if they think he continues to perform in Tampa. And as the season gets to the end of the season, I mean, it is Brady, right? Is Brady really just going to let their last season go away like this? I saw a meme on a subreddit the other day. It was like, friendly reminder to cut out the toxic people in your life. Brady's 2-0 since his divorce. So, but I can't imagine a world that Tom Brady doesn't just pick up the Buccaneers and get them to the playoffs. And we know that he likes Lenny. So we'll see if he can pull him along for the ride. For Watson's 25th masseuse, I went with DeAndre Hopkins. And this is a weird one as well. But when you look at Watson's 25th masseuse's roster, there are plenty of star wide receivers on that team. You've obviously got Hopkins, Duvernay, Darnell Mooney, Stephon Diggs, Deebo Samuel, Marvin Jones, who's been okay, Parker for the Patriots, who's been meh, Noah Brown, who's kind of getting there, Pringle, Van Jefferson, Skowronek, both the receivers for the Rams, so one of them's got to eventually do something, right? I just feel like there's enough depth there that DeAndre Hopkins is who's the oldest receiver that he has and on the shortest deal that he has, could possibly be the one to go to somewhere else. And DeAndre Hopkins is, at least in my opinion, still a star caliber player. And so is there a team out there that's willing to buy him? Because he's also not expensive, his contract. His contract right now is for $28 this year and $39 next year. You talk about a perfect potential candidate in terms of a team that's strapped for salary cap room. Like if Watson's and Brownout can partner up, or Watson's and Kungsu Panis can partner up, where they're able to send, if Watson's can get an upgrade for Hopkins and take on cap room, and they can send Hopkins back to clear cap room, like that might be a deal that's great for both teams, and Hopkins could do that. And Hopkins has put up some points. It's been a little bit quiet recently, so he's only played 5 games so far this season with his suspension. 23.3, 36.9, 13.6, 19.8, 18.1. The dude still plays. The tricky thing is he has a bye week in week 13. It's a super late bye, so does a team want to buy him effectively on bye week? But maybe a team that's already in the playoffs or really pushing for it there can snag him to start and can think about their salary cap room in addition to the play there. And I thought of that salary cap piece on the fly. Look at me. And our last buy of the week with Team Havoc and a full version of their logo. I had to get a tight end on here. It's me. Dallas Goedert. Dallas Goedert is a top 5 tight end before the injury and still is a top 5 tight end points. But you know who's number 4? Zach Ertz. And Zach Ertz is still on the team right now. It looks like both of them, I think Ertz is done for the season and Goddard is out for the next couple of games. So it's possible that Goddard falls out of the top. It's possible both of them fall out of the top 5, which could be a holdout where Ertz would hold out. Goddard would not. But he's pretty expensive. He's $63 this year and he's on a 3-year deal. His third deal is $101. And do you want to pay a tight end that much money? It's obviously a new general manager taking over the team here, and what's their philosophy on tight ends? You've got some of the fiends for tight ends like myself who wouldn't mind necessarily maybe paying more to a tight end if you think that they're the guy. But Dallas Goedert, if I'm not mistaken, is the highest paid tight end in the league. I think he's paid more than Kelsey. I'm pretty sure he's paid more than Andrews. And so when you think about the implications behind that, as I take a look, Kelsey's paid $56 in this year, signed to a 3-year deal just like Goddard is. And then when you take a look at Andrews, he's paid $62, and Goddard is paid $63 this year. The other thing I can think of is Kyle Pitts, who's been interesting. Okay, so Kyle Pitts is paid $74. So, excuse me. Goddard's the second highest paid tight end in our league right now. And so you wonder, is Havoc okay with that? Would they rather those dollars go somewhere else? It's completely up to what they want to do, and this could be a candidate to move. Again, he's not bad to go to a rebuilding team either. Tight ends really hit their stride late 20s, like 30, 31, and he's 28. And he's clearly on this high-powered offense. He could be a great addition to a team that's willing to take on that money. I am insistent on keeping this under 40 minutes because the number 4 in the very beginning scares me because I want it to be a 1, then it turns into a 2 and a 3. So we're going to end this here. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I know it was a different format with it just being me. So hopefully you guys didn't mind listening to me ramble for 39 minutes and 58 seconds. Don't forget, trade deadline live stream next week. If you want to be on it, please DM me and let me know so we can make that happen. It's going to be at 8 p.m. Eastern time. It's going to start. I love you, not 40 minutes.